Welcome to the Health by Haven podcast. I'm your host, Haven Quinlan. If you're a multi-passionate wellness enthusiast, then you're in the right place. I'm obsessed with learning as much as I can about the wellness world, and I want to share that with you. Each episode will dive into various aspects of health and wellness through inspiring and informative guest interviews with some solo episodes thrown in. Tune in for all things health, and let's have some fun, shall we? Rebekah, thank you so much for joining us again on the Health by Haven podcast. I am so thrilled to get to chat with you again today about the 5 elements of Earth and nature and how they're all interconnected to the human body.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Haven, for having me. I'm excited to share this information with whomever finds this episode to be interesting.
Yes. And Rebekah was on episode 61 of the podcast. So that would also be a great place to start. If you haven't listened to her first episode yet, she gives a really great foundation and overview of acupuncture and how it relates to the body and how Chinese medicine is all interconnected. And so today we're diving in a little bit deeper. This is episode 1 of our mini series on the 5 elements. And so I will pass the mic over to you to kind of give everybody listening an overview of the 5 elements, and then we'll dive into the first one.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. This idea kind of sparked between me and Haven talking about, how do we share and how do we talk about Chinese medicine? Because it is such a different language and a different way to approach the body versus a Western approach. And the beautiful thing is that Chinese medicine, of course, the dates kind of vary to whatever you read, but about 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. And, as I was reflecting on this morning on how I'm going to talk about this and how I want to present this information, just look in our history of 20 years and 50 years of how much development has happened. So 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, we don't know, but there's a lot that's happened since then.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to take yourself back to like way back, the furthest back you can imagine, when societies and kingdoms and things of that nature were being formed as humans were starting to expand across the earth. And of course, if you've got humans and you've got life and you're trying to survive, there's going to be injuries, there's going to be sickness, there's going to be different things. And so through the time, they had to figure out how do we heal our people? How do we take care of our people during famine or during war or different things that are happening? Chinese medicine is very integrated with everything. So let's just kind of talk about the 5 elements just for a moment. So main 5 elements, they say in Chinese medicine, is 5. And we're going to start this series with the metal. And so we've got metal, we've got water, wood, fire, and earth. And so those are the 5 main elements that we'll talk about in this series. And how does that relate to our bodies, and how do we diagnose as acupuncturists of where there's an imbalance? Because that's really what acupuncture is about, is finding, okay, what's not working and what needs a little bit more information and what's overly working, because ultimately the body wants to survive. And we talked about that in the last episode. When I'm teasing out these separate elements, it's very hard in some ways because nothing really is isolated from the other, right? And if most all of us have seen the Tai Chi symbol, right? So it's the round circle, and then there's black on one side, there's white on the other, and then there's a little black in the white and a little white in the black. And that is a symbol of everything works upon each other. Everything depends on everything in order to function as a whole human being or a whole plant or a whole tree. And so to tease this out is a little incomplete, but it kind of gives you a little idea of maybe how the Chinese approach the body, and maybe you can understand a little bit how influence that we have in our acupuncture treatments can affect the whole body, and then it balances itself. because the body has the ability to heal itself. It is innate in our DNA. Today, we're going to actually talk about the metal phase. So, right now, when this is being aired, we are in our fall. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the hot of the summer, right? We're heat of the summer. It's 90 degrees plus. It's heavy outside. It's humid. And then all of a sudden, September, middle of September comes along, and now we're starting to the air is starting to get a little bit more crisp, a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more dry. The leaves are starting to fall off the trees. So there's a shift happening in the season. And so thus our bodies. So we reflect what's happening outside as well as inside the body. So in the metal phase, so we call it the metal element, the metal phase, and it is the primarily the large intestine and the lungs. So those are the two main organs. So in Chinese medicine, we pair organs. You've got 10 primary organs, but you've got 12 what we call channels. And the reason is because the fire phase, the fire element has actually 4 channels involved with it. And we'll talk about that next summer. um, I'll tell you, when I was in school, metal was the hardest one for me to understand. And because I had a real hard time understanding why the lungs and the large intestine are paired together. Because, in the other ways, there's the heart and the small intestine, which that one's a different one too. But gallbladder and liver, well, that's beside each other, right? They're like really intertwined, so it makes sense. So I had this student tell me when I first started school, and she was a 4th year student, which is means she's about to graduate. And she tells me, she's like, the lungs and the large intestine are super precious. And the lungs is where we breathe in air. They call it heavenly chi in the books.
Mm.
And it's like, it's pure oxygen coming into the body. It is life, right? When we're born, we come out of the womb, and the first thing the doctor does is pops it on the butt, right? And it's like, it's that breath, it's that first breath, right? And then when we die, we have that last breath. And so breathing the air, the oxygen that we breathe in feeds the body, and it influences the blood and how we can function and all of those things. And so it is our connection to heaven, if you will. So on a emotional aspect, the lungs have a lot to do with intuition. It's like that
Mm.
intuitive hit that you get. You're like, I need to do this, or I'm not feeling really good with this. Like, when you walk in the room and you're like, there's something off here. That
Mm-hmm.
is our lungs giving us a little bit of those spidey senses, right?
Mm.
Going down an alley and down in a city, and your hairs stick up in the back of your neck, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the metal phase with its alarm system. And so you got the lungs so that you breathe in, and that is your connection to earth. Well, when we defecate out, this is the large intestine, we exit the fecal matter that we do not need in our bodies any longer. And so that is our connection to earth. So it's this heaven earth connection, and we are the human in between.
Mm.
So the lungs and the large intestine is the first channel of the whole entire cycle. Now, this is all one channel. Everything is connected together. So this is where it makes it a little harder to explain. But the gist of it is when we breathe in air, that we breathe in light. When we have a bowel movement, we let go of what we don't need any longer. And so that's kind of the gist of the two organs. But how do they show up in the body, right? And so how I learned is the lungs, they call it a delicate organ. They say it's your connection to spirit. And then we know that when we get intuition, we get all of these good ideas and we get these feels. Well, the thing is that we have to also let go of certain things in order to create space for the new, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got a room full of crap, right? It's piled up
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Well, you don't have any room for inspiration. You don't have any room to sit down and do anything. You're crowded. You're like bunched up, right? So then you have no space to have any new ideas, any new comings in. So from an emotional point of view, the lungs in its positive is that intuition. On the negative aspect, it is our grief.
Mm.
It's sadness, right? And if you want to do the little exercise that one of my Qigong teachers took me through, was take a moment and just imagine something that is kind of sad. Maybe it's a loss of something or something recently that just really just made you sad. Where do you feel that in your body?
Mm.
Yeah. And immediately you kind of feel it in your chest. You feel
Yeah,
it.
that
Yeah.
was where I was feeling it for sure when you said that.
Yeah. And so if you're listening to this podcast, just try that just for a split second of like feeling that depression. So it's almost like it depresses down, it feels a heaviness. So that is the movement of that energy. So it wants to come in and it wants to come down and out. And then as we grieve, we have to let go of what our ideas of what that was, right? Or what we expected it to be. It's kind of like when a parent dies too young, right? That they were supposed to grow old. I was supposed to be taking care of them, or what have you. And then I am, I'm grieving the loss of that thought, that idea that I had. So that letting go and then the grief. And so there's the emotional aspect. How does it show up in our physical bodies? The power of breath. So we think of like meditation, breathing deeply. Any yoga practitioner listening right now is like all about the pranayama, the breathing exercises. Because when we breathe deep and we breathe slow, then it calms our nervous system. So this is another way an acupuncturist would calm the nervous system is by invigorating the lung energy,
Yeah.
by hitting the lung point, right? And then you're like,
Hmm.
oh, I could take a big breath, and so that's really cool. And then so some deficiencies that would show up was just fatigue, inability to take a full breath in, wheezing outward, so like asthma types of
Hmm.
things, that would be a weak lung deficiency. So we would want to boost that up. And then the large intestine. Golly, the large intestine. How much study has been done on the large intestine in the last, what, 20 years? Uh,
Yeah.
dopamines, right? The 50% of our dopamines in our body is produced in the gut. And so when we're eating things that maybe our bodies cannot tolerate very well, like gluten, for example, that seems to be a hot ticket right now, is that when we eat gluten and we're sensitive to it, then you feel lethargic, you
Hmm.
get constipated, or the opposite, right? You just don't feel good. You feel swollen inside, almost puffy type of feeling,
Hmm.
or your belly distends when you eat that pizza,
Hmm.
and um and so it's there's the large intestine is such a big deal in letting go of waste, but also so many other systems. So I'm going to kind of go down the rabbit hole of how we digest food, because this is very important and it kind of gives you a little picture of what's happening. So we eat whole food, you know, and then it goes into the stomach, and then the stomach just kind of puts it, it crumbles it down into a substance that is very absorbable for the small intestine. So it goes into the small intestine. Well, when it gets to the small intestine, it gets really, really hot and like very light liquidy. The reason is because it needs to be so much heat. That's why it's associated with the fire phase, but the heat helps to make those little nutrient molecules so small that they can be absorbed, exited out of the small intestine into the bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you get your nourishment, is through the small intestine. And then once it hits the colon, the large intestine, it's got to cool down, right?
Mm.
Because you don't want that heat coming out of your body. You would
Yeah.
just, and we've all had times like that when our stomach's upset and we diarrhea, right? And it's hot and it hurt, it's like, ooh. So what the large intestine's job is to pull that excess water out of the fecal matter into our fluids. So it
Mm.
feeds our skin, it feeds the insides of our arterial walls. It is basically represented as the insides of everything. So arteries, veins, lymphatic system, anything that has kind of a fluid aspect to it. When we're digesting, all of that water goes into here. So it's very important. So that's where leaky gut, right? If it's leaking too
Mm-hmm.
much, then it gets into the bloodstream and that's not good.
Yeah.
When it's in a healthy state, and then you have a solid bowel movement,
Mm-hmm.
right? Should be right. And so when someone comes in with say they have a lot of swelling, like swelling in the joints, and they're just kind of feel like they're puffy. Of course, we talk about their digestion, and you know that. You got all the
Mm-hmm.
questions.
Yes.
And when we're finding that the person's swelling and they're hot, like their pulses, which is one of our diagnostic tools, really fast, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, oh, they need to cool down and they need to dry up because they've got swelling.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where acupuncture looks at the opposite of what's showing up in the clinic, like whatever you're presenting with, and we go opposite of what is that? That's what's missing, right?
Okay.
That's not what's showing
Mm-hmm.
up to the party. All this heat and dampness is showing up, but there's nothing to dry and cool it to regulate it.
Okay.
So, yeah, and it's so wild. I never really understood the digestion system until acupuncture, even though I studied it many times.
Yeah.
And so, when someone has a lot of allergies, a large intestine, because the large intestine channel starts at your finger and then it goes up. Try to show it on the video, but it goes up and then it comes up to the mouth and then up to the other side of the nose. So it's how we again breathe in. Isn't that
Okay.
wild? So there's the
Yeah.
connection with the lungs and the large
Uh-huh.
intestine, and or one of the connections. And so that's kind of how they figured it out. I mean, it's just amazing how they came up with all of this stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And so, in a healthy sense, you have good bowel movements every single day, if not twice a day, and you breathe freely, your immune system. So, it has a lot to do with your immune system. It has a lot to do with your lungs and the health of your lungs. And that contributes to, the heart and all of the other functions in order to breathe in freely and then to let go freely as well. Yeah.
So when someone comes in, say they are dealing with well, let's just stick with the bowel situation. They're dealing with IBS or chronic constipation, or the other end, they're having diarrhea, and they're looking to acupuncture as a fix for that. And you do the pulses and the diagnostics and everything. Where are some of the points on the body that you might target to help kind of balance them out?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, every treatment is kind of defined to you as a
Mm-hmm.
person. Now, personally, I use a style called Sa'am acupuncture. And what I love about Sa'am acupuncture is that it's kind of a simple way of treating in some ways, but it's extremely strong. So it's usually 4 points. And two of the points that I would use in the large intestine are on the large intestine channel. I use the small intestine, a point on the small intestine. That makes sense, right? We need that movement through the small intestine to get into the large intestine. And then I have a stomach point because the stomach has a lot to do with descending And that's
Mm-hmm.
another aspect. They learn the direction of movement. Just like when I said you feel grief, you feel a heavy downward feeling. It's the same way with the body. It all has like different ways of moving. So if someone came in with IBS, well, IBS, one of the things that I have found in IBS, so if somebody comes in, they got a diagnosis, right? They're like, I've been diagnosed with IBS.
Yeah.
Well, the reason that you have IBS may be a bit different than someone else that has IBS. So typically what we like to do is go through all of the symptomology to to paint this picture. And I think I
Mm-hmm.
told you that when we were interviewing our first time. It's like I paint a picture of like, oh, okay, so there's some stuff here, there's some stuff there. A lot of times with IBS, it's worry,
Mm-hmm.
it's stress, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the way you manifest stress. So some people, can I use you as an
Sure,
example?
absolutely.
So when we interviewed, you have an IBS symptoms, but what else did you have? You had anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So those play into together, and that's how the acupuncturist looks at it, is like, oh, okay, so she kind of has this leaning toward worry and ruminating and kind of getting stuck in her thought process of not being able to figure out the answer or the shift. And then that creates anxiety in her. So then it feels like a pit in your stomach, right? And
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you've got stomach issues and then you've got bowel issues. So how we would approach that is looking at, okay, where did this begin? Where did this start? Because sometimes just talking about it helps you understand what's happening with you.
Mm-hmm.
Your body's trying to talk to you and tell you, hey, we need a better way of handling this stress, you know? and
Yes.
and otherwise it's just going to keep talking to you. It's going to keep screaming at you, until you shift. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times that's what's challenging with acupuncture, but absolutely beautiful with acupuncture because we don't look at, okay, this is your diagnosis. This is the only thing I treat. I only treat the
Mm-hmm.
belly. Well, that's not going to work because then I'm missing the other components that are contributing to that problem.
Yeah, which is why I just like love the whole concept of acupuncture so much because the body is so interconnected and it's harder to work in silos because you might think the root of the problem is one thing, but it's really another. Like my example, like the IBS, I have done every test under the sun with a GI doctor, but really like what I'm learning is probably the main source of my stomach issues aren't from a dairy allergy, which is what I thought, but are from chronic stress and anxiety.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And you didn't have the tools to kind of really understand that. And that's the thing about, I think the more we get educated on how to understand our bodies and how to get out of the whole like the symptom stuff of going to the doctor and getting prescribed something, because in some ways that is like, hey doctor, this is my problem. They only have these tests to go by. They really don't have the viewpoint of like a bird's eye view to kind of pull out to see what the whole person issues are. And that's just a break between the Western and the Eastern approach, because the Western has such great things too, but they're very compartmentalized. And so I feel like I wish we could marry,
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
together and love on each other, and kind of just see where we can understand from a different point of view. And it would save us a lot of heartache and a lot of medicine taking and such.
Agreed, 100%. Okay, so as a brief overview, the metal, large
Mhm.
intestines and lungs are the main organs for the metal group, and they're all interconnected because you're breathing in from the lungs and then you're exiting out with the large intestine. Is that a
Yeah,
good overview?
That is a very good overview.
You're
Yeah.
teaching me so much.
You. Yeah, and it just in representing of the fall, the autumn, how does that relate into our bodies? The beautiful thing is that if we the more we learn about nature and its cyclical nature, and then look back on ourselves and kind of could see that reflection of, if I don't let go of this, then I'm not going to have room for the new stuff. Because in the fall, you know how school starts in the fall, typically.
Hmm.
And your fall semester is always so much better than your spring semester.
Spring is like, are we done yet? Can we just get to summer break?
Here. Yeah, it's like the fall though, you kind of like, okay, I'm going to get my little notebooks, I'm going to do this. So there's like this clarity that comes with the fall. And a person that is a metal composition, because we have that as well, is that they're very like clear, they're cut, they're like, it's someone that you want to have in your pocket of like, how do I make this decision? You bring up a problem with them and it's just like so clear to them when it was like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do, on my end. Um, and so that's that personality, that's that motion, that's, all of that kind of stuff. So that's basically the metal aspect. Really, the more you feel into this stuff, the better it's going to be, and the better you're going to understand, and the more questions you're going to have.
Yes.
So,
Which is why
yeah.
we're going to have episodes on all of the different elements. So stay tuned for all of the next ones. And then you can always come back and review, when the next element comes out, like, oh, wait, I need to refresh on the metal. You can come back to this episode, refresh on the metal. And then you can come back, in years as it's cyclical with the seasons if you want like a little refresh going into your fall season.
Yes, perfect.
Well,
Yay.
thank you so much, Rebekah. I learned so much about the metal element. I know the listeners are going to learn so much. And if you guys have questions, don't hesitate to message us on Instagram and we can address those in a future episode as well.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Health by Haven podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review. It makes such a huge difference in reaching new people and spreading the joy of healthy living. I would also be so appreciative if you subscribe to the show in the listening app of your choice so you never miss an episode. Your support truly means the world to me. Have a happy, healthy day, and I'll talk to you again soon.